Well, if you haven't read this, you need to. A new deep dive in The New Yorker painting a stunning portrait of Elon Musk, stunning in multiple ways. The focus on the billionaire's growing influence in both the war on Ukraine and the U.S. government at large. According to the new report, while on a call with Pentagon officials about his company's satellite-based internet that Ukrainian troops have been really relying on the battlefield, he mentioned that he had a conversation. He spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Musk has previously denied speaking to Putin, but the former Undersecretary for Defense Policy told the magazine that Musk said that he had spoken to the Russian president. At the same time, U.S. defense officials were worried he might suddenly decide to pull Starlink internet out of Ukraine. The Undersecretary also told the reporter, the journalist who wrote all of this, Ronan Farrow, that Musk appeared anxious that Russia might see his company's involvement as enabling the war to prolong on Ukraine.
Farrow reports that Musk's influence within the U.S. government is widespread and that over the last 2 decades, quote, Musk has sought out business opportunities in crucial areas where, after decades of privatization, the state has receded. The government is now reliant on him, but struggles to respond to his risk-taking, brinkmanship, and caprice. The New Yorker contributing writer Ronan Farrow joins us now on his latest article, Elon Musk's Shadow Rule, how the U.S. government came to rely on the tech billionaire and is now struggling to rein him in. This is a fascinating piece, and I was talking to you during the break about there is a line here where you are, trying to get some questions from the Pentagon about Elon Musk. And the spokesman says that, and this is a quote here, we'll talk to you if Elon wants us to. I mean, there seems to be a degree of deference here from the Pentagon.
I mean, that's a small manifestation of the balance of power we're talking about between this private individual who has become so wealthy and so powerful in different fields and the government, the actual state. And we were talking about this in the break a little bit. That is a complicated dynamic. That is something that has some pros, right? Mm-hmm. This is a person who has advanced various fields in meaningful ways. There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him in all of these ways. But at the same time, he is someone who has behaved erratically. And the fact that we're getting that kind of communication from the government as journalists, like we'll go through this private individual, that's pretty unusual. And it is a small but significant sign of just how beholden they are.
And one thing I thought was so interesting is how you highlight in the piece, you write national security officials I spoke with, meaning you, had a wide range of views on the government's balance of power with Musk. A supporter of his is General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who spoke to you sort of glowingly about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the framework for several of those conversations with people who were so supportive of him was that all the conversations in advance and with their teams were about, okay, but we want to make sure we're making clear to Elon that we're supportive of him. So you really get a little glimpse into just the texture of the relationships. There is nothing wrong with those kinds of warm relationships, obviously, between a private individual and significant government leadership, even in the context of a military contractor relationship. But this is something more and different. And, I talked to a lot of historians to get a sense of how new this is. The fact that we can only put crew into space, that NASA has to go through Elon Musk and no one else. The only alternative we have right now at this moment, probably for the next year, is sending people up via Russian launches. Mm-hmm. The fact that if we want to advance green energy policies around electric vehicles, we got to go through Elon and his charging stations because he's got 60% of the stations in the country.
Right.
Historians told me that is a new extreme and a newly political dimension to this kind of private power.
Specifically on the Russia's war in Ukraine, I think the most obvious example for most people at home is when he decided to end the internet service through Starlink that he exclusively offers to the Ukrainian military, and that's how they communicate, obviously. He then reversed that, bemoaned the cost. But is the Pentagon, is the government attempting to unravel this at all now that everyone knows the dependence?
Well, 2 things happened. One is at the end of this story, that is one of the many stories told in this profile, of a standoff over internet access in Ukraine, where it appears he was talking to Vladimir Putin. He was telling multiple people that at the time, though, as you point out, he has since tried to deny that. And then he was curtailing access specifically in areas that Russia was contesting. At the end of that, one of the things that happened was the Pentagon did pay up. They just said, we're going to get a deal in place to make sure this doesn't shut off entirely. But, the other thing that happened is people on the ground in Ukraine, people on the front lines remained spooked, right?
Right.
We bought his services apparently at a very, generous rate. This is a situation where, metaphorically, he had the U.S. government and the Ukrainians at gunpoint. Yeah. And to this day, they do fear that he is going to curtail service more. It's very hard to get people to talk in that context, and I'm glad that some did.
Once you get into the sort of middle of the piece, you back into his life and you go to his childhood, his first marriage, his losing his first child, all of these things that created the Musk that we know. Can you speak about the Musk that we know now via X, formerly Twitter? And you talk at the end about him taking on AI and the way that we've seen him operate and conduct himself both with Twitter and now with AI, because you quote Sam Altman, a huge figure in AI, saying, Elon desperately wants the world to be saved, but only if he can be the one to save it.
This was a common sentiment amongst Elon Musk's peers, that he does this very significant work that at times, in my mind, there's no doubt it's a net positive for all of us, right? Even in some of these spaces where there have been problems, the Ukrainians needed that access to satellite internet. It created a bulwark against Russia's cyber attacks. In the case of launches through NASA, we are now no longer reliant on the Russians to do that. NASA officials told me we're moving faster in some of these cases.
But the Twitter thing's different.
But the Twitter thing is different, right? And we're seeing in these recent years that Elon Musk has behaved erratically at times, that the biographical facts that you mentioned that have led to him at times talking about his loneliness, his sadness, the fact that there have been questions about his psychopharmacology and public reports about, the Tesla board being concerned about his Ambien use,
ketamine,
the ketamine use that I write about. These are all things that can be used in a legal and healthy way. However, there is concern, that this is a human being that we're giving all of this power to, and there are very few checks on that power right now.
I should say that in the story, you say that you reached out to Elon Musk. He did not respond. Has there been any response since it's been published? Well,
he actually declined to answer questions for the piece, which is a subtle but significant difference from not responding. Sure. And it's his prerogative to do that. The interesting thing about Elon Musk is he's been the subject of so many books, so many biographies, so many profiles, and he's a rare case where the mystery is not him. He is engaged in a stream of consciousness, a monologue about himself through a huge swath of public life. He is tweeting, now Xing, I guess we would say, because he renamed that company, all the time. So we know a lot about him, and I felt like what we weren't hearing was, what is it like for the other people on the other side of the table from him in all these sectors?
I just think this is such a brilliant framing, because we don't often talk about what he means for us, what he means for society and the world and America. And what did you write? You said the private power is the word you used, is just really important. So
yeah, I appreciate you all having a thoughtful conversation about that. It's a little heady to get into historical economic policy on a morning show like this, but it is important, and it does resonate with all of us, everyone we know, right? How much power we're putting in the hands of private people, individuals who can be dangerous or erratic, right, under some circumstances for all the good they do. That's something we want to think and talk about. And there's a quote from a former NASA administrator in this piece, Jim Bridenstine, a Trump appointee, a conservative in the new vein politician, very about protecting economic progress and not exalting government power. However, he says such a powerful thing. We have to understand that too much deregulation can also present dangers, and that if we're putting our eggs in one basket, the Elon basket, that could present some dangers. So the fact that even conservatives are saying that in this piece is meaningful.
It is a fascinating piece. Ronan Farrow, thank you for coming in to talk with us about it.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Great to be here.
And we also reached out to Tesla, SpaceX, and Musk himself for comment and did not receive a response.